All right, good morning, boys and girls. I'm Mr. Dolan. We're going to start off our lesson today with a famous person in history, and the person I chose for you guys was the 33rd U.S. President, Harry Truman. And Harry Truman was the president who got us involved in World War II with Japan. It happened because the Japanese decided to bomb Pearl Harbor, which was a military base in Hawaii, and what had ended up happening was the U.S. retaliated with going to war with Japan, obviously, but later on, what had happened was they dropped atomic bombs on two Japanese cities, Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Um, and I just wanted to start off with like just a little introduction, kind of. Just I wanted to see like what you guys know anything about World War II, Pearl Harbor, Harry Truman, and then after that I will reflect and we can look into. We'll read about some things that were true from World War II, and yeah. Yeah, very good. So, like I said, Harry Truman was the 33rd president of the United States, and he was in charge, or I'm sorry, he was in charge of the military. He was in the military before World War II and World War One, and he did take over presidency when he got elected. Yep. Anything else? Yeah, so Pearl Harbor was, like I said, was the attack on U.S. naval base in Hawaii, and the obviously the United States citizens and everybody around that area were terrified because they were slowly starting to hear that they were under attack by the Japanese, and it just didn't look good, obviously. And so what ended up happening was the United States ended up joining the war, and we were allied with the British, the French, and the Axis powers, which were the Japanese. For a little bit, the Russia, but not long after Stalin, or I'm sorry, after Hitler turned his back on Stalin. But yeah, the Axis powers were Germany, mostly Germany, Italy, and a little bit of Russia, and then Japan. But what ended up happening that got the U.S. into World War II was because the Japanese didn't appreciate that the U.S. was blocking trade, um, not allowing the the Japanese to get their supplies and needs from their allies, which was Germany at the time. And what ended up happening was the Japanese just got sick of it, and they attacked Pearl Harbor. And they attacked Pearl Harbor because we were doing all these things, and so the U.S. retaliated with going to war with Japan. And yeah, so what else? Another thing I wanted to do was by the end you'll be able to like summarize what happened at Pearl Harbor. And it seems like you guys got a very good grip on like what it is and stuff. But World War II was obviously the Second World War. But what happened was throughout like history, like after immediately after World War One, the United States and Western Europe were making Germany pay for war reparations, which are taxes or money owed because of like casualties and all this other good stuff. So what ended up happening was they got sick of it. So then Germany, under Adolf Hitler, decided to basically attack all of Europe and take over it while being like a big power. So what ended up happening was um, the other Europeans heard about this, and Britain was not having it. And so what happened was they went to war with Britain, and Britain joined the war. And it wasn't until like late World War II that the United States um, was in Europe and was in Japan because Pearl Harbor happened so late. But under Harry Truman, what ended up happening was we went to war because of the attacks on Pearl Harbor, and Japan did not want to have peaceful agreements or peaceful talks with us trying to fix it. So Harry Truman decided that war was the only answer because you can't if you can't fix it, you must go to war if other people are going to keep attacking your country. So they went to war, and what ended up happening was the towards the end of the war, the Japanese refused to um, they refused to sign an agreement, like a peace treaty. So what ended up happening was um, Harry Truman decided that the only way that we can get rid of the Japanese and make them surrender is if we drop the atomic bomb. And at the time, the atomic bomb had never been used anywhere, just only practices like the Manhattan Project. Just basically, they didn't, I mean, they had an idea of what this stuff could do to people, but they had no idea that still to this day, there are areas of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that are very radioactive. Take Chernobyl, for example, in Russia. It was a nuclear power plant that blew up, and you still you cannot go there today because of the damage that uh, uranium does to humans. And there are still areas in Japan and Hiroshima and Nagasaki that you still cannot travel to because they're so toxic still. Um, but it was a new technology, like I said, and you never want to use it. But the U.S. had no choice as not to use it because they were so under. The Japanese wouldn't surrender to them. They wouldn't talk peacefully with them. So the idea was that if we dropped a bomb on them, then they would just not attack, or I'm sorry, just not retaliate, because obviously if someone's using nuclear warfare on you, you're not going to attack right away because your whole country is in shambles essentially. But yeah, so for like the next 2 minutes or so, what I wanted to do was I wanted you guys to um, I wanted you guys to like write down your thoughts. I have a thought bubble chart, and I just want you guys to write down like, why do you think Harry Truman did drop the bombs on Japan, and if you were in his shoes, would you have done the same thing, or would you have tried something different that maybe he didn't do, or maybe didn't work in the past? So for a little bit, I want you guys to write down those answers, and we'll come back together and we'll talk about it. All right, so perfect. So what do you guys think? Yeah, so Sammy thinks that Truman didn't have to drop the bomb because she thought that you could have done it by another means instead of killing innocent people. And yeah, obviously the US didn't go in there saying, "Oh, we're going to drop an atomic bomb no matter what." They went in there trying to fix things up, and I'm not saying I agree with bombing them, and I'm not saying I don't disagree, but the whole idea was that we had to do something to stop them, and it was that was the only choice that people saw fit. And so that's why we did it. But any other thoughts? But very good. Um, all right, so Brian thinks that we should have done it only because there was no other choice. And like I said, like it was very hard to just decide to drop a bomb and kill those many innocent people, but it had to be done to an extent because the U.S. had no other choice. Like Japan wouldn't listen to the United States peace talks. They wouldn't surrender when they should have, and it's a two-way street. Like the U.S. obviously, you don't want nuclear warfare ever to happen, but if that was their only result because Japan was so intolerant of listening to them, I feel like as though that had to happen. But yeah, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to watch a quick 5 minute video about. Um, I wanted to share a quick 5 minute video about the bombing, or Harry Truman talking about it, and about Harry Truman, and just about the bombing or the atomic bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then I have an exit ticket for you guys. And on the exit ticket, what I want you guys to do is I want you to just write down 3 new things that you learned, and I will collect them. And it's not going to be for a grade, but I want to see where you guys are, like what you thought was interesting and what you thought was boring. And you can write anything, and I promise you, it won't hurt my feelings. But I just want to know what you guys thought was the most interesting or the most boring or anything. So, all right, thank you, boys and girls, for having a wonderful class and just being very attentive and paying attention to everything and giving me all these good ideas to work with. And I really appreciate it. So, thank you guys. Have a good day.